This is the RPM Podcast, starring Scott Riggleman.
Here comes Scott Riggleman trying to fill that hole.
Tim Riggleman.
Holy crap. He's a freaking animal, by the way. He's got a hell of a pumper on that thing. He is a heck of a pusher. We're like a bulldozer.
And Josh Matthews.
Could you see yourself being a pool guy, though? The level of work seems ridiculous. Stupid.
And here we are again, episode 171 of the RPM Podcast. It is 8:12 p.m., April 29th, 2020, on a Wednesday night. Once again, we're doing it on a Wednesday night, a little later in the week than we normally want to do, but we have a very special guest on, and that's when he could do it, so we worked around his schedule. I'm Scott Riggleman in the Edge of Divorce Motorsports Studio in Manchester, New Jersey. My brother Tim Riggleman is up in the studios in Farmingdale, New Jersey. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing great. Ready to go.
Everything okay with the coronavirus up there?
I don't have it, so it's good with me.
Are you bored of being bored yet?
Yes.
All right, and then we got Joshua Matthews down in his Waretown, Matthews family studio down in Waretown, New Jersey. Josh, how are you doing?
A little sore from physical therapy and work, but otherwise good to go.
All right, well, since we have no real racing going on right now, we're continuing along with our what were we calling it again, Josh? We were calling it the
Local Legends
Racing Series. And this is our third episode doing this. We had two previous ones. So the first one was Charlie Kramer Jr. and Doug French was on last week with us. Those shows are still up on YouTube and all the podcast channels. If you guys want to go back and listen to them, if you haven't already, go check them out. But tonight we got a very special guest, and I'm real excited to talk about this one. We have the 7-time Wall Stadium track champion. He has 66 wins at Wall Stadium. Mr. David Michaels. How you doing, Dave?
Good. How's everybody doing tonight?
We're all hanging in there, just getting a little restless, not seeing any real racing, just the computer stuff.
You hate it.
8 championships and 67 wins.
Would you sneak a win in on us? I had a program, and I was going by a program in 2012. Would you sneak one in under there?
Yeah, it's definitely 67 and 8 championships.
All right, because I counted. You had a 1986 Sportsman Championship, right?
87.
You won an 87 Sportsman Champion? That's the one I missed.
Yeah.
We don't want to sell you short. Those championships are hard to win.
Yes, they are.
And then we had 1996, 1998, 1999, 2000, 2003, 2005 in the modified division, right?
Yes. Yep.
All right, so you're 8-time champion and 67 wins. I had 66 wins. That's what it said in the program, and that was a program when you were second on the all-time win list. But I think Jimmy has passed you since then, right? I think you're down to third now.
Yeah, Jimmy got me last year, I believe.
Yeah, and your first one came on 8/10/1985, and the program shows your last one came May 27, 2006.
Yeah.
All right. Wow, you're starting in 85.
Scott, this is why you need to get your notebook.
Oh no, I took it right out of the wall review. Sometimes the wall review is wrong, I guess. But the one was my fault. I saw the 86 Sportsman Championship. I didn't see the 87 Sportsmanship. Dave raced during a modified time, Josh, when modifieds were constantly changing. And Dave actually raced in the modifieds when they were the Sportsman division, like a 2-barrel car. And they became the premier division. So he kind of moved up to the premier division without moving to the premier division. You know what I'm saying?
Scott, was it more the innovations changing, or was it the rules changing that when you say the division?
No, the rules changed. As a matter of fact, there was a boycott, wasn't there, David? Wasn't that in 1991 the tour type modifieds boycotted?
Basically, I mean, we started out with the Sportsman. That was 4-barrel. Then we went to the 2-barrel, which was cost efficient because they were losing the Sportsman. And then the modifieds pulled out. They thought they were going to hold out, and they didn't. Jenny couldn't race without them, but we ended up being the premier division. So, yeah, I never changed my division. It just changed around me.
Yeah. The modifieds held on. They wanted more money, right? And then didn't they actually show up to the racetrack one night and decide not to race for the purse? And then Jenny just said, well, don't race, and we'll just race the other division as the premier division.
I don't remember. I don't think they ever did. But it was a big mistake, and then they ended up going to Flemington.
Right.
It's a shame it happened. I mean, everybody loved the modifieds. That's why Turkey Derby's so crowded, but
right.
It was a real shame. There's nothing like the sound of a real modified.
And then it was funny too those days. Like some of the guys that boycotted and left with the real modifieds, they eventually all came back and ran the 2-barrel modifieds for less money anyway.
Yeah, there were so many guys. I mean, Christ, you had Charlie, Jamie. There's probably Eddie Bone, Timmy. There's probably 10 or 12 guys that came back.
Harry Reid.
Harry Reid, Pete Britton. I mean, there was a lot of guys that came back and ended up running with us.
Right. All right. I want to go right to the beginning of your family racing. I mean, your family's been around racing as long as I can remember. It's very much like my family where I had my grandfather and my father race. I race. And my nieces are now racing. My brother's kids are racing. Who actually started racing in your family? Did your grandfather start racing, or was it your father was the first one in your family to start racing?
What you asked me before about my grandfather, my dad's father didn't, but my mother's father owned a car back in the days when they raced in the gravel pits. He was an actual car owner.
Okay.
They had Manahawkin Speedway. There was actually 2 tracks in Manahawkin. One was in the gravel pit and one was an actual asphalt track. But yeah, my grandfather started. Then my dad, he raced boats, speed garvies in the mid 60s up until like the early 70s. And they bought a car from Bob McCullough. It was a yellow 604. Well, they dropped the 4 and they ran it for, I don't know, a few races. At the end of that year, it was a yellow 60. That's how our color and number came about. And then in the winter, they built a brand new sedan, my uncle built, and he ran that for like half a season at Wall, New Egypt, Pleasantville, and Heightstown. They'd race 4 nights a week with the same car at different tracks, different surfaces. But he ended up flipping that car real bad at Heightstown 9 times. He ended up 2 broken arms, broken collarbone, and several other things. That car ended up, it ripped the body off, everything but the doors. If we had pictures to show you, it's pretty neat. The doors were welded on the car, it ripped the rest of the body off, and they ended up putting a coupe on it. So,
and they left the doors?
Yeah, it actually bent the roll cage down bars from the rear hoop back to the bumper. And you can see in the pictures where they just cut a piece of it out, stuck a new piece in, and they didn't butt weld it. They put a sleeve over, like a big 8-inch collar. And welded it. And that was how they redid the roll cage.
Going back to the Manahawkin tracks, I mean, when I worked down there, I guess it was like 94, 95, I worked down there with Big Martin, and I remember going over it, and that track was still in the woods, and we go over there on lunch breaks and actually drive around and do laps around that track. Is there anything left of that track anymore, or is it totally gone now?
No, that's all gone. It's a shopping center there now. Yeah, we used to ride our motorcycles around there when we were kids. It was hard riding a dirt bike around there with knobbies. All the thing wanted to do was it didn't want to turn. It wanted to go straight when you hit the corners.
Now, wasn't that track, wasn't that ran by, didn't they have a club down there that ran that racetrack?
Yeah, they had some kind of a club. I don't know the exact name. I've seen a lot of pictures, and I've got pictures in the garage. They were basically just old jalopies with, 4-inch wide tires. There wasn't much to them. The ones before that in the gravel pit were even, they were ugly cars, but I guess back in the day, that's all they had.
Do you know what year the asphalt Manahawkin Speedway closed?
No, I don't, Scott. I'm going to say late 50s, early 60s.
Oh, really? That long ago, huh? Because I said, in the early 90s, the track was still there, and you can actually do laps around it. So it sat there vacant for a very long time.
I'm going to say early 70s. I was a kid riding my motorcycle up there, and it was long gone. You could see a little bit of the posts from the fence and stuff. It was all growed up.
Yeah. I remember Everett Kremer, Jerry Kremer's father, he used to tell me stories about the track. He said the problem they had with that racetrack, a a lot of people thought it closed because there was a trailer park right across the street from it, but he said it wasn't that. He said the problem they had with the racetrack down there was keeping fans in the grandstands because the horsehead flies were so bad there in the summertime. You used to get eaten up real bad trying to sit there and watch the races. He said it got so bad they used to have like burn barrels all around the racetrack, and they would try to make fires to keep the bugs away. But he said the bugs were so bad down there that it was hard to keep the spectators in the grandstands.
It's very possible because that area where it is back in the day was nothing but pine trees and a few oak trees. And if you're ever around pine trees, you know how the flies are. So it's very possible what he's saying is right.
I tell you what, I like that track too. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Wall Stadium, and it had some pretty high banking to it too. I mean, it's a shame that track went away. I'm not sure about the track you're talking about that was in the gravel pit, but I remember too working down there. They used to tell me there was a Tuckerton Speedway too, a little south of where the Truexes lived and everything. I think they said it was like behind a school or something. There used to be a track out in the woods out there too. Do you remember anything about that racetrack?
Nah, that was about the same time as the Mount Hawk and gravel pit one. It's the same thing. They would race like one Saturday, one Sunday or something. And basically all they did, they'd go around and take up a collection, and that was the purse. There was no real set rules and stuff. So
yeah, I mean,
basically just a bunch of guys got together and they knocked the windows out, put a roll cage in, and brace up the front bumper, and that was it.
Yeah, we get told a lot of those stories. I mean, I said we had Charlie Kramer Jr. on a few weeks ago. He had the same story up here in Toms River. They had a club and a track, and they basically ran it themselves, and they all chipped in money and had a purse, and that's what they raced for. Dick Barney also tells me a very similar story in Lakewood. There was a racetrack in Lakewood. It was all club run and everything too. It would seem that that's the way racetracks did their business back then before Wall Stadium opened up. Wall Stadium seemed to be the first professional track around with guardrails and grandstands and concession stands and all that stuff, where someone actually owned the track and it wasn't a club type deal. You did mention about the boat race, and that's another thing I learned quite a bit about when I was down there working. Either you raced boats down there or you raced at Wall Stadium. It was pretty cool. And what I got to learn a little bit too, a lot of this stuff was interchangeable. There was a couple of guys that raced down there with you guys that would actually, like a Bobby Walton or one of the Kremers, they would actually use their race engines in the boat for a while and then get sick of boat race and pull the motor out of the boat and then put it in a Troyer car and then go to Wall Stadium and race. Did you ever mess around with those boats at all?
No, my dad got out of the boats right before I started racing. As a matter of fact, the year I turned 18 was when they closed down Atlantic City Speedway, and I wanted to get down there and race. And it went under before we did that. But you're talking about the boat engines. My first engine was one of my dad's old boat engines. And I remember every time you would drain the water out of the radiator, it would come out with these solid rust from all the years of salt water. Yeah, because that's how you cooled a boat engine. The water from the bay would go into the motor and keep it cool. There's no radiators. And there was so much salt water just clinging to the block inside. It was just solid rust every time you would drain it. I ran that motor for like 3 or 4 years before it finally detonated.
You bring up Atlantic City Speedway. Me and my brother spent some time down there. My father was like your father, but he ran in the modern stock division. He would run 3 or 4 nights a week too. He would do the same thing. He'd race New Egypt, Wall Stadium, Atlantic City, sometimes go to Hightstown, East Windsor Speedway. If I remember correctly, didn't your father win the very last modified race there?
Yeah, they had a special race. It was I think it was $1,000 to win. And there was guys from all over came down there. And it was always pretty much in the latter years, my dad and Tony Siscone, it was one of them were going to win on any given night. I mean, you had some of the old timers like Jerry Camp, Carl Griner and all that. They were good guys, but they were at the end of their career. My dad and Tony were coming up. And my dad was like licking his chops when he saw that race come up because that was like one of his better tracks and he knew it as well as Tony. So he got a kick out of wrapping Charlie and Gil and all the rest of them in the ass as he was passing them when they would do the same thing to him at Wall because he was, he never had the equipment that they did at Wall, but down there he had it covered and he was licking his chops when he saw that race.
If I remember right too, you said people came from all over. I don't know if it was exactly that race, but it might have been. I remember Reggie Ruggiero and Mary Fiore bringing the 44 down there one time. Was that for that race too?
No, it was a 100 lapper. They ended up running 50 laps of it, and it rained, and they declared Reggie the winner. Well, the opening night the following year, my dad didn't have his license, and they ended up running the balance of the race, and he put Jerry Camp in the car, and Jerry ended up winning the race. But a little side note with the Reggie thing, he came down and they had that, it was a purple Chevette 44 the Reggie or Mario had. Well, back in the day, back then, I believe there were 15-inch tires, where now the modifieds are running 13. Well, Mario come down and they had, I think they were super modified tires. They were 17 inches wide. But it was an open competition race. He had another 8 inches of rubber on the track, so you really can't compare apples to apples. I don't think so. But I mean, it was open competition, but nobody really knew about these wide tires.
Right. You did mention that you guys always had yellow number 60s. If I remember correctly, that last race that your father won, that wasn't a yellow 60 car. Wasn't that car white and pink? Do you know why he changed the paint colors that year on that car?
He never had new car. Well, early years, like my Uncle Jim would build the cars back in the coupe and sedan, early Pinto days. But he had lost his license. He had the year before that. We'll get back to that. I got a side story with that with the 77 season. He had a Seaman car. But that car you're talking about, he wanted to get back into racing after he sold everything. And we were looking in the racing paper, and we were headed up to New York State. We were looking at one of Bowler's cars, and there was a guy named Dale Mertz. We were headed up there, and then as I'm reading the racing paper, sitting in the back seat of the truck, I looked and I said, Dad, Dutch Hoag's got a car for sale. He had 2 cars for sale, actually. Well, we stopped and looked at that because it was closer, and we ended up buying it. But it was white, and it had like these crazy stripes on it. It went from pink to red to, it like transferred from pink to red, and that's the car you're talking about.
Yeah, that was a good looking race car. What kind of chassis was that car? Was that something Dutch built, or was that a car that was built by Troyer or Evans or anybody like that?
It was an early Troyer car, and they did some modifications to it because Dutch, at the end of his career, his knees were real bad, and he couldn't get in the car. And it was before the removable steering wheels. Well, a guy named Lee Dolan was doing some of their chassis work. He come up with this thing. It was a big collar around the steering shaft, and he would lift this spring-loaded pin up, and it would open up like a C shape, and the steering shaft would slide out, and you would slide the whole steering column over towards the right side window, and you would be able to climb out of the car. But nowadays, of course, the steering wheel comes off, and everybody can climb out that way. But that was before this. You just had to make sure you had that thing locked in, or the steering shaft would fly all over.
Did he buy that car complete with engine and everything, or did you guys have to put your own engine in it?
No, there was a guy, Marolo Racing Engines, up in New York State. It came all ready to go. All we had to do was change the numbers. And then in the following year, after he won that race at Pleasantville, they ended up painting it yellow again.
Oh, so that white and pink car became a yellow car?
Yes, and he ended up destroying it on the front stretch. We got pictures of that. It looked like Vinnie Green's car. I mean, there was nothing. Well, Vinnie's, the motor was gone, but there was nothing in front of the motor. Cross sector, the whole front of the car from the motor forward was gone.
Do you remember what you paid for a modified like that back in the days like that?
I think it was probably like 10 grand complete with a big block. That was, I want to say the winter of 78. He bought that. Because that last modified race was in 79 at Pleasantville.
Did you ever call the guy that you were going to his house before you went to Dutch's house and say, hey, we're not coming to buy the car? You just never showed up.
Actually, Dutch did, because he was good friends with a guy, Dale Mertz. So, but yeah, I mean, it was a good car. And I always wish my dad had a lot better equipment. Like he never had, like Barney always said, Tommy, I want to put you in one of my cars one time, because Barney had the best of everything, from motors to, brand new tires every week. But he always told my dad, he said, Tommy, I want to, put you in one of my cars one night and see how you can do. Because everybody knew he had the ability, but just, I mean, he wasn't a low budget guy. He was like a middle of the road guy. You know, he didn't have. He had Gilmour. He didn't have Jack Tant and Hutter.
I was telling my brother, I said, I remember your dad, you know, his last few years at Wall Stadium, he was winning with a car that looked like an older Cavalier and he was beating guys, you know, that had the fancier Troyers like Barney and Frenchie and all those guys, you know. He still ran very good for what he had, and he could definitely beat the guys with the fancy Troyers with the stuff he had.
I think the best year he had was 77. He'd bought had Sonny Seaman built a brand new car. It had torsion bars. They were a pain in the ass to make, but this thing, and then Charlie Kramer ended up buying one the following year because he ran so good with it. But he finished third in the points in New Egypt with it. And that's back in the 70s. You know what the class of cars was like at New Egypt. I mean, he did something to finish third in points there. And the last night of official racing at Wall, he was leading the modified points. But he had every year we would go down to Martinsville for the fall race, and he had his hotel rooms and all that. And Jenny decided, because there was a lot of rainouts, she was going to extend the season one more week. Well, my dad said, you know what? I booked these rooms. We look at it as, you know, a fun weekend, so we're not going to come up and race. So he put Bobby Giverson in the car just to race that night. He ended up winning the modified car owner championship, but he lost the driver's championship to Gil. And I always kid Gil. I said, that 77 championship, you technically didn't win. He laughed about it.
Yeah, my dad has a very similar story like that. In 1979, he actually lost the championship at New Egypt in the modern stock division to my uncle Danny Beckett, and he actually took a week off to take me and Tim camping. I said, Dad, well, if you're running the points, why in the world did you take a weekend off to go camping? He's like, you know, Scott, back then all you won was a trophy. You didn't win any money in the modern stock division. And he said, basically, the track didn't even count the points. We kept track of the points. The division themselves picked one guy in the division to take care of the points. And he said it wasn't really that big of a deal to him back then, and he had like a 50-point lead at the time when he took me and Tim camping. So he's like, I still had a shot by taking, you know, one night off to go to win the championship, and I fell short by 2 points. But he said back then it wasn't really that big of a deal. You know, he wanted to go camping instead of racing that one weekend. You know,
Scott, is that why Nancy does the spreadsheet and keeps track of the points?
Yeah, you got to keep track of those points. He said that was in 1977. He had a Sonny Seaman chassis. Sonny Seaman was pretty much the guy that taught Richie Evans how to build chassis. A lot of Richie Evans chassis were basically the Sonny Seaman type design. And Charlie Kramer did bring up his Sonny Seaman car when he was on the show with us, and he said the problem was he remembers your father having that good Sonny Seaman car, so he ordered one too. And when they got it, it wasn't as good. And he called Sonny Seaman back. He's like, "Oh, I built them all a little different. Like he didn't have like really one set way of building. He would change a few things, and then he told Charlie, well, here, change it back like this. This is what the other guys have down that way on my chassis." So he just said it wasn't like today where everything's built precise in a jig. Sonny Seaman would just build a race car, and some come up different than others. You know,
on the floor and up on the jack stands. It was funny. I mean, my dad smoked cigarettes, and he had Sonny put a cigarette lighter right in the dashboard. It was pretty funny.
I know.
So he bought the car like race ready from Sonny Seaman, like it was totally complete.
Everything but the motor, and it was nothing fancy. But that car was probably the best handling car my dad ever had. I mean, it was, like I say, he did good at Pleasantville or New Egypt and Wall with it. But yeah, that was it was a basic
what's the car that the McGill guy had, Doug McGill has up this way. He has a Tom Michael Pinto car up this way.
That's the one. Also in 77, my dad won the championship at Pleasantville. He won 75 and 77. That car that Doug has is the 77 championship car. He won, I think he won 11 or 12 races that year. They had bounties out on him. Tony ended up winning the bounty. I mean, me and Tony kid each other about it. He's like, I won the race. I said, yeah. But I said, you started on the pole. And the guy's car, my dad, due to the handicapping, would have to start, 17th, 18th every night. And he caught Tony with about 2 laps to go and just couldn't get by him. But I always kid Tony. I'm like, you might not have won that race if you had started back there with him. So.
That's right. The car that Doug McGill has, who built that chassis? What chassis is that car?
That was my Uncle Jim. he built my dad's sedan that he flipped. Then he built a Pinto, which was center steering. Little story with that car. They went to Martinsville the first time. And the guy drove over the scale and he goes, "Boy, you need to take some lead off of that car." And he says, "We don't have no lead. What are you talking about?" It weighed 3,200 pounds. It was like a lead sled. Like sitting over top of the transmission, guys would always have like a piece of tin. My dad had 1/2-inch diamond plate. He said he's got the family jewels over top of that drive shaft. He don't want to lose them. So there was just so much extra weight on that car. They had tubes in the wheels. They ended up taking them out. They didn't know anything back in the day about, tubeless tires. And so then my Uncle Jim built this, the car that Doug has. That was my dad's Wall Stadium car. And he only had one car at the time. And they would come home from Wall on Saturday night. They'd back it in the garage. And me and one of the other crew members' sons, we would pull the motor, the big block, out of the car every Saturday night. And we'd set the small block in. While my dad and his crew, they would go down to the local bar, have some cocktails, and they'd get back there like 10 o'clock in the morning to finish bolting it up. Then we'd go to Pleasantville on Sunday with the same car. We did that for that entire season.
Didn't Pleasantville have a weird engine rule? Weren't they like 320 engines or something like that down there?
339 they were.
What were they?
339.
339. So what was that? Like a 327 cubic inch engine, like bored out or something?
Yeah, that, and then they would play around with these strokers. It was like, I don't know, small journal crank, long rods or something that would wind up quicker, but it would be more if you ask Tony, if you ever get him on, he could explain it better.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a couple different combinations for the 339.
Why do you think they had that engine rule down at Pleasantville? Were they trying to make him like a sportsman car? Or
I really don't know. I don't know. What was Wall at the time? 327, wasn't it, for sportsmen?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, they were running like 318s or something back like that in sportsman division, right?
Yeah, when I first started, you're right, it was 318.
Because I always remember back in those times too, Evergreen, they had like a 320-inch cubic inch rule too. They had smaller motors too up there. They were basically 305s bored out to get into the 320s. Because I remember Ronnie Buck Sr. building a bunch of those motors back in the day.
Yeah, it was a shame. I think that's what hurt a lot of racing back then, all these different rules and stuff. I think that's why the SKs came around, because you could run at numerous different tracks under the same rules.
So you would switch the motors overnight to make it down to Pleasantville, and you said you did that for a while. So they eventually said, "All right, let's build a car primarily just for Atlantic City. This way, we don't have to do this every week."
Yeah, well, that Pinto that my Uncle Jim built was the last one he built. When the Seaman car came along, he just put that exclusively as a Pleasantville car. It just took a lot of work off of everybody, because me and my friend liked it because we were like 13, 14 years old, getting to change the motor in the car every Saturday night. But it was a lot of work.
Now you mentioned another guy, Lee Dolan. Dolan was a chassis builder too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was like a Troyer copy kind of a guy. Because after my dad got rid of the Dutch Hogue car, then he bought a car off of Lee Dolan. Jamie Tomato called it the Anteater. It was like an Omni body, but it had this nose piece that was about 4 foot long. It stuck out past the bumper. Jamie called it the Anteater. And my dad ran that for a couple of years. He won a few different races. As a matter of fact, one of my fondest memories, May of '86, it was like middle of May, me and my dad won the modified features. Or he won the modified, I won the mad feature. And then following year, exactly a year apart, we did it again with that Dolan car. I won my race, he won his. I think that's the only time I can ever think of any father and son winning back-to-back on the same night a year apart. I know Eddie and Parker did it once, and I believe somebody else might have done it, but I don't know of anybody doing it back-to-back years a year apart.
Were you in the Dolan car, or was he in the Dolan car?
No, he was in the Dolan car, and I had a car that I bought from Jerry Kramer. There was an old Corky Cookman car, It was when they first came out with the wide 5 hubs. Corky was at Stafford, and the hub exploded, and the wheel came back, and it bent the roll cage on the right-hand side. It still had the dent in it when I bought it from Jerry. You could see the wheel imprint. I won 16 races in '86 for that car, and then another 7 in '87. I had a lot of wins for that car. It was a good car.
I remember when Jerry bought a car off Corky Cookman. That was a blue Pinto, wasn't it? Wasn't it? It was 04, wasn't it, when he bought that? The number on the car?
The car that he bought from Corky was the one I had. That was it was a red Cavalier. It was a red 88 when I got it from Jerry, and then the year after that, Jerry got a brand new Trotter car. It was the blue one, I believe, the blue 88.
Now, as a kid, I remember Corky Cookman's car. They said Dolan on the rear quarter panel. Was that the same Lee Dolan, or was that something else?
Different. That was some engineering firm or something that sponsored. He had that, I think, for his whole career, basically.
Oh, okay, so that wasn't the chassis builder Dolan. That was a sponsor he had.
Yeah. And then after my dad got rid of the Anteater, he had Lee build him a brand new car. And my dad ran that, basically till the end of his career. That was probably like.
Was Lee Dolan from upstate New York?
Yeah, he was somewhere as Elmira, up in that area. He's up near George Kent and all them. Mm-hmm. I believe it was Elmira he was from. It was an old, Chrysler place had a dirt floor. It wasn't much. I don't know how he ever built anything in the place.
Especially the cold winters up that way, Yeah,
it had space heaters all over. I mean, it was a good car. I remember one Turkey Derby. My dad didn't want to race. It was, or not Turkey Derby, Garden State Classic. It was back when they were 200 laps. And my dad said, "You want to run it? Go ahead." So I ran it. And at the end of the race, it was about, 50 to go. Siscone lapped me. So I just pulled in behind him and I started just following him, seeing how he was doing it. And I picked up some pointers. So at the end of the race, Tony come over and he goes, "Thanks, for giving me room." He says he had this thing in long races. Every 10 laps, he would look in the mirror to see if he was gaining on or pulling away from the car, or they were gaining on him. And he said he kept seeing the roof of my dad's car. He said, "Tommy," he said, "you were keeping up with me." He said, "It wasn't me, it was David." And he looked at me, he goes, "That was you in that car." He said, "That was pretty impressive for the first time in a modified." So I always wish that I had
seen a pattern with your family. It seems like you bought a lot of your race cars from the upstate New York area. And that was way before the computers and the internet and stuff like that. So basically you would find these people through Ariel Racing News and stuff like that and buy the cars.
Yeah, as soon as the paper would come in the door, I was always, looking through the one ads and all that stuff, looking for things, and they were good days.
So your father was always his own car owner? He never had anybody buy him cars or anything like that?
No, he always had his own stuff. He did pretty good, with the bulkheading business. Him and Sonny Rothstein, his partner, had. Actually, Sonny started racing.
Yeah, I remember that name.
He raced before my father. I think he won the 1974 Sportsman Championship with a sedan he bought from Dick Armstrong. Had the new style racing #1 cars.
Yes.
Well, Sonny bought that car. He raced that for a couple of years. And he won the Sportsman Championship. And when my Uncle Jim built the first low slung Pinto for my father, the 77 championship car, he built a second one for a guy named Ronnie Kohler and a third one for John Levance. Well, Ronnie never got to race it. He died in an automobile accident, and his father sold it to Sonny. Well, Sonny raced it for 4 or 5 years in the modified division. Well, won a couple races. And it sat in his garage for a long time. Well, my dad had bought my first car, I believe, in 81 or 82 from Don Kramer. It was one of their Treadway Gremlins, the super speedway car. Mm-hmm. I ran that for 1 or 2 years. And then Sonny said, "Why don't you buy my car for him?" So I ended up running Sonny's car, which was the sister to my dad's Pleasantville Speedway car. So that was pretty cool. And we used to go to New Egypt I was starting to back with the modifieds because they didn't have enough cars for a field. And every Wednesday night in New Egypt, I was making $150 just for running in the back.
Yeah, I remember those days. I remember those Treadway Gremlin body cars. As a matter of fact, Ray Shea had one there when the Mad Divisions were gone. His son Mike drove one at Wall Stadium for a while, and we actually did some work on that car down at Ronnie Buck's shop, and we made like a hood for him or something like that. They were pretty cool cars. They, the cages weren't offset or nothing. They were like wide perimeter type cages, like in a cup car and stuff like that. Whatever happened to that Treadway car you had?
I sold it. I forget who the hell bought it. But it ran wall for a while in the sports.
Did they run good on the short tracks? Because they were built for super speedways. They were built for like tracks like Dover and Daytona and stuff like that, and Pocono and Trenton. And then these guys, when the super speedway modifieds, stopped racing on super speedways, a couple guys tried running them on short tracks, and they just looked too big and bulky for a short track.
The only one that I ever seen run good was the one that Stives won the Garden State Classic, the 300 lapper. That was Don Kramer's Pinto. I ended up with the Gremlin. But that thing, that ran good there. But my Gremlin, it was always tight. He ended up cutting the front end off and putting a Lindblad A-frames and stuff on the front. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what it was like when it was Treadway. But I remember back in the day, Don talked to my dad because Don had Speed Garbies back in the day, along with Kevin's dad, Everett. Everybody had Garbies back in the day. Well, Don says, Tommy, why don't you get a Treadway car? Well, back in the day, you were building a car for probably $4,000 or $5,000. So he said, all right. He calls Treadway up with that Rebel accent. He goes, $11,956. Well, that was like what a car cost in the day. And my dad almost shit himself. So he's like, nah.
He was from Virginia, wasn't he? Wasn't Treadway down in Virginia?
I think it was North Carolina.
Oh, he was all the way down in North Carolina, huh?
Yeah, it was. They were.
So
they were
never bought a brand new Treadway car then, huh?
No. They were immaculate race cars, but they were expensive back in the day.
All right, so we're going to move on to your racing career now. Did your father finally retire, and then you just kept racing full time?
Well, we both raced, for the longest time. He was modified, and I was sports. When we worked on the cars, the same, side by side in the garage. We parked next to each other. And later on years, I got hurt at work. I fell on a piece of rebar, and I missed a week. And my dad, he actually got in the car for me and ran a couple of weeks. So I got owner's points. But that was more stressful than racing. I think watching him racing my car and spotting for him, I was a nervous wreck.
So when did your father finally stop racing?
I believe it was when the modifieds were done. That was when he stopped.
And he never went to Flemington or anything like that?
No, he never went over there. He stayed at Wall with me. Okay. Yeah, it was like a family thing. I mean, him and my mom would come with my wife, and everybody sat on top of the hauler, and that's what racing's about. I mean, I think it's getting away from that nowadays. It's not as much of a family thing as I used to see. Everybody in the
you chose pretty much to race your career mainly at Wall Stadium. Before we leave your father's career, did he ever go down south and race at any like the speed weeks, like at New Smyrna or Daytona or anything like that?
No, never. The farthest he ever went down, every year he would go to Martinsville for the fall race.
He would actually race the fall race?
Yeah, he went to Pocono a couple times. He went to Trenton the year that DeZaro beat Bugsy Stevens. He said he was out on the track practice, and that was before he knew anything about balancing wheels. He thought he was flying going down the straightaway, and he said Bowler went one side, or DeZaro went one side, and Bugsy Stevens went the other side. He said it stuck the doors right off the car. He went by so fast, and he thought he was flying. But he ran Pocono a couple times, and we actually went to Stafford when they had the spring sizzler. I believe it rained out 2 times in a row, and he said to hell with it. He wasn't going back the third time. We'd tow up there and sit in the motel room waiting for the rain to stop. But that was the extent of what he did. East Windsor, Pleasantville, New Egypt. and Wall.
Now you primarily raced at Wall Stadium, but you did race a little bit over at New Egypt. Do you have any wins over at New Egypt?
Yeah, I had 6 or 7 at New Egypt. I won a couple 100-lappers. I won a 1991, I believe, or 94. I won that race.
That was a neat little racetrack, wasn't it?
That was my favorite racetrack. I had all my wins and championships at Wall, but I think at New Egypt, you could go into pits with a flat and come back out and get up and challenge for a win. But at Wall, if you got to go to the pits for a flat, most of the time you're lucky to get back to the top 5 because there's so many good cars and there's not that much room. But New Egypt, the backstretch had to be 100 foot wide. I mean, there was no way you could block anybody on the backstretch. I really liked that track.
Yeah, I liked it too. And you say it right too. The back straightaway was so wide, but then when you come off of 4, the front straightaway was real narrow. So you had to do most of your passing on the back straightaway. It was a fun track. The speeds were a little bit lower, so it was a little bit more fun driving it. And you didn't need like $1 million motor there either. You can get away with something a little cheaper over there. I did like that track. I always called it like the best poor man's racetrack. Like you didn't especially in the street stocks like I raced over there. You didn't need $1 million race car. You just needed something that handled good and something with some good gearing in it, and you could do pretty well over there.
Yeah, the trick to that place, you had to get the speed bumps right under your seat when you went around there, and them speed bumps down low in the corner. You had to hug them babies. So yeah, you didn't need a whole lot of horsepower, and everybody thought we were bullshitting, but we never changed anything with the stagger. We opened the stagger up and changed the gears. We went to the same springs and everything that we ran at Wall Stadium. Mm-hmm. Nobody would believe it. And the year Kenny Woolley was winning all those races with George's car, we're over there. And I remember one night on the scale, Jimmy the janitor says, "You got no competition over there." And Tony Nappi says, "There's only one car that can run with us." And he pointed to us on the scale. But being as we were racing for the championship at Wall, we didn't want to get into a 2-night-a-week thing over there and, run ourselves thin. So, but we had a lot of good races there at New Egypt with Kenny and those guys and Johnny.
Now you pretty much, I remember you in your later years, you always had Troyer race cars. Did you ever buy like a brand new Troyer car?
Yeah, I actually had 2 of them. I had a 94 Troyer car, and then in 2001 I bought another one. But before that, it was all new stuff. The 94 car was probably the best car I ever owned. That thing was my backup car for years. And like Timmy would have a problem, he'd come over and say, "Let me put tires on this," and he'd end up beating me with my old car because the thing we never scaled it. It was one of those cars that just handled. One night Jimmy come over. He said, "Let me run your car." He said, "I need points." And we're racing each other for points. And I loaned him my backup car to race me for points, which kind of stupid, but that's what racing's about. I mean, that's what I was starting to say before. I think racing is getting away from that. It used to be like a big family in the pits, and I don't see that anymore. It seems to be more and more cutthroat and people not helping each other. But it used to be, we would have a wreck. We'd sit down and talk about it, argue a little bit, and we'd have a beer and get over it. But now it just seems like there's no camaraderie up there anymore.
Well, I think part of the racing too now is like, say, back when you race, you could wreck with somebody on a Saturday and you'd be mad Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. By Wednesday, you were starting to get over it and you wouldn't see that person again until you see them again Saturday. Well, nowadays you wreck with somebody on Saturday night. You're on Facebook Saturday night. You're on Facebook yelling at each other Sunday night. Like it elevates more over Facebook, and then you're twice as pissed off when you come see them again Saturday. There's no like cool down period anymore because of like social media and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think that has hurt the racing a little bit. But yeah, I remember you getting into some wrecks and you always seemed to work it out. Plus you were always racing for points, so you didn't want to get into one of those type situations where you're wrecking with somebody every week. You were a very smart racer back in the day. And I like how you said you had that one car that always handled good. I remember John Blewett III always telling me his favorite race car was like an old 96 Troyer. That car just worked. He loved the 96 style Troyers back in the day. He said that car just always worked for him. And every time you buy a brand new car, it just never worked quite as good as that old car, Everybody gets one of those race cars that just seems to always work all the time. The last car you bought was what year was the last car you bought?
It was an '01 Schroeder car.
Is that the one you sold to Robert Geibel?
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually ran pretty good with that car too. After he got it from me, he beat me at Turkey Derby one year with that car. I was in an old Raceworks car, and he was in your car. I finished second to him at a Turkey Derby in the crate division. That was a good car. Do you have any racing stuff left?
I got the race car hauler. That's it, and I got one of my dad's last cars in the back of the shop. It's like I got a metal rack built around it. You can't even hardly see the car, but I still got the hauler out in the field that I bought from Don Ling.
Does it still run?
Yeah.
What's the history of that truck? Do you know? Do you know where Don got that truck from?
The truck was built. I might have this backwards. It was either built for Sox and Martin, and Paul Newman got it, or the other way around. But I believe it was built for Sox and Martin drag team, and they ran it with their pro stock car for a few years. Then it was sold to Paul Newman for his road racing, and then Donnie bought it from Paul Newman.
But didn't Donnie take the box off it and put it on one of his mail trucks, or was that the original cab and chassis too?
No, I'm pretty sure it's the original cab and chassis. The only thing he did, he put a straight 6 in it where I had a V8 because he said it had too much power and these guys were getting speeding tickets with it. That thing would go down the Parkway, 85 with a car and all the tools in it without a problem.
And the inside of it, wasn't it all like woodwork too? Wasn't it real nice woodwork in there?
Yeah, he had like nice cabinets and like linoleum on the wall. The floor is like looks like a bowling alley, like 2x4s on edge.
Right.
Cool.
I remember looking inside that thing. It had really nice woodwork. It almost looked like the inside like a boat, like a yacht or something like that. You know, it was really that was a really cool hauler, and it's pretty cool. Why didn't you ever sell that thing? Why did you hold on to it?
I don't know. I go over and look at it once in a while. I guess I feel like I'm still involved in racing. My wife says I'm crazy. Just sell the damn thing. Somebody could use it.
I tell you what, I remember one scary night though. I was walking by your hauler and you guys were unloading your car, and it's pretty good that you were parked where you were parked, because I remember you were backing that car out of the hauler and the cable snapped, and luckily you were on the Nerf bar of the car, steering the car out of the hauler, and you rode that thing down like a surfboard, and you were able to get the car, you were steering it and you were able to get the car stopped before you hit anything. Do you remember that night?
Yes, I do. It scared the hell out of me. I thought I was going to back into Alice Ann's car with the 15A was right behind me. I thought I was going to back into it, but luckily, they started going back up the hill and it stopped. But that scared me that night.
My dad had a ramp truck too, and he always had a rule: somebody had to be inside the car when we unloaded it. And we used to say, "Dad, just unload it, just unload it." And then when that happened that night, I couldn't wait to get home and say, "Dad, now I know why you always made me sit in the car when you unloaded it off the ramp truck," because Dave had his cable break, and it was a pretty scary moment. And everybody got real lucky that nobody got hurt that night.
Yeah, that could have been bad. Another funny story. It was raining. I called him on the radio. I said, "Get the pit box in the truck because I'm going to drive this thing right in the truck." Because I knew I didn't want it to sit out and get wet. So one of my guys was standing up in the middle of the truck with the winch cable. He was going to hook it to the front bumper. He thought I was going to go up and stop, but I was like, if I stop or slow up on the ramps, the back tires are going to kick out, so I got to keep my momentum up. So I hit that ramp probably 15 miles an hour, and he only had like 1.5 inches on either side of the front tires. It went right through the doorway, never touched nothing. And the guy realized at the last minute that I wasn't stopping. He jumped out the side door. I would have run him over.
Yeah, that was definitely a cool horror. And like you said, where you parked, you could sit up on the roof and see the races and everything. Josh, he would park kind of where the tire truck is now, where you walk in between the photo booth and the little grandstands there to get into the main grandstands. Yeah. He would park right there. He's parked there for years. That was his spot, and he had a high rise, enclosed ramp truck, and you could sit on the roof of it, and his crew would sit right on the roof, and you could see the racetrack. It was a pretty cool setup that Dave had. It was one of the nicest setups at Wall Stadium.
That's awesome. I'm jealous.
And Dave, before you had that, you had a box truck, didn't you, with the open trailer, kind of what like Richie Evans and all them did?
Yeah, we had an open trailer forever. I think it was probably only the last 5 or 6 years that I had that, the box truck. We won a lot of races with that open trailer. It doesn't make you any faster.
Was that open trailer one of those Dillon trailers or no?
No, it was, I got the trailer. I forget who I got it from, but we ended up extending it like 4 feet and putting that, the box and the tire rack on it. The trailer was actually really short when I got it. We, stretched it out.
And did you build that box truck yourself? Because I remember it had like a little lounge and stuff in it. Didn't you divide the box up where you could sit, like had like a little couch in it and stuff like that?
Yeah, we put a wall like 4 feet from the cab, and we had a couch in there bolted down to the floor. We had a sign on the door. It was called the Love Shack. That ended up sitting behind the garage for a long time. I think it ended up going to the boneyard.
I was telling my brother today when I was talking to my brother, I've been to your house a couple of times when I was working for the Truexes, and I told him those guys didn't get rid of nothing. I said, I remember pulling back there was old race cars all over the place, Nerf bars hanging from the trees, and trailers and trucks all over the place. You still live at that house?
Yeah. Yeah,
Was
we're
that
next.
your dad's house?
Yeah, well, it's the race cars were in my parents' house, and I live next door to them, and my sister and her family lives on the other side of me. For years, there was nobody back here, but slowly but surely, there's a few houses around us, but we have school behind us and federal property on the other side. So we really don't have a whole lot of people. And after my mom passed away last year, I ended up buying my sister's half of the log cabin and the race shop. And our youngest daughter's living in the race shop apartment, and our oldest daughter's living in the log cabin.
What car is in the shop that is your dad's old car?
It's the last Dolan car that he had, the brand new one that he had built by Lee.
Did you ever think about restoring that car and doing like the vintage club stuff with it?
Yeah, people have mentioned it to me, and
I think you would have a lot of fun doing something like that.
Probably. I know Doug McGill said if he ever sells my dad's Atlantic City car, he's going to give me the first shot at it.
Would that be something you would buy from him and try to restore it?
Yeah.
Well, I remember seeing that car at the Monmouth County Fair. It still had the motor and everything in it, and the motor turned over and everything. Was that the original motor?
He said, would you restore or would you leave it the way it is? I said, personally, when I saw Kenny Brightfield's car at Motorsports that year, it still had the clay on it from Heightstown and stuff. I said, that looks good. I said, like, there's drawings on the trunk lid that my mom did by hand. Mm-hmm. It was my dad always had Pedro's Pussy Posse on the back. Well, I remember that.
Tim, you remember
that? It had that Pedro logo on the back. Well, she did that by hand. And I said, you're never going to, duplicate stuff like that. I said, it's your car. You can do what you want. But he never, restored it as far as I know.
He never touched it. I always told him, just get it running, change the oil, get it running, put valve springs on, make sure the brakes work, stuff like that, but leave the body and stuff the way it was, it was all original, leave it that way. I thought it was really cool. The car you still have in your shop now, is there a motor and stuff still in that one, or is that just a bare chassis?
No, it's a bare chassis. We ended up cannibalizing it over the years, taking a hub off or an A-frame or the rear, and I think the only thing may be in it is the bell housing and the seat. Hi, Nancy.
I just got a couple more questions from you before we let you go. Believe it or not, you've been on for about an hour already. Over the years, you had some different engine builders. I remember you had Hegeman Motors and Borwick Motors. How would you go about whose engine you would use that year?
Well, whose engines what?
Like, you had Hegeman engines one year and maybe a Borwick engine the next year. How did you pick and choose whose engines you would use in what years?
Well, 86 and 87. Well, 86, when I won all those races, I had a guy in Waretown doing my motors, a friend of mine, and he didn't want to do it anymore. And then Jimmy came to me. He said, if you ever have an issue, he says, get a hold of me. He said, I'd love to do your motors. Well, I had Jimmy for probably 10 years. And then it started to get a little bit sour. He had Timmy come on board, Danny McLaughlin, and he didn't have as much time for me. So Ridgway said, why don't you take your motors to Frankie Boardware? So I ended up hooking up with Frankie. And, all three guys did excellent motors for me. Frankie's may not have always been the most horsepower, but they were reliable and they lasted all year long. Jimmy's motors were good. Danny's motors were good. I mean, and I was just fortunate to have good crews and good sponsors through the years. I mean, you can't do it without a crew. Any driver that says he wins races himself is an idiot. It doesn't happen.
And I remember that too. You guys always had a professional look. You always had nice crew shirts, and you said it, man. You always had the same crew guys year in and year out. Do you still keep in touch with some of your crew guys?
Yeah, the ones that are left. I mean, I lost, Mikey Clayton. He passed away, and like 3 or 4 of them have passed away over the years. But yeah, we still remain pretty close to guys that I have left. And it was the same 8 or 9 guys every year, and my trusty mascot Gilbert.
Gilbert's still around, that's for sure.
But I wanted to touch on something. There was a couple things that I wish I had done over the years. Back in '86 when I won all the races, Cisco came to me. He says, David, he said, this was before Jeff Gravatt was done marketing. He says, Charlie Roberts wants to sponsor, or not sponsor you, but market you to maybe get into a modified. And I'm like, yeah, right, that ain't going to happen. And I never took Charlie up on it. I just always wondered what would have happened, because Charlie was pretty marketable back in the day. He was getting sponsors for people and stuff. So that's one thing that bothered me. And towards the end of my career, the last car that I had, that car was evil. I mean, we won championships with it, but it was never really a good car. And it was the year
Johnny won. 2001 Troyer you had?
Yeah. It was the year that Johnny won the championship. And me and him were having our battles during the year. I mean, we hated each other on the racetrack, but we respected each other's ability. I mean, it's not like that way with a lot of people.
Well, you can always blame it on John Spotter, too, because I'm sure my brother was spotting for him at the time.
But, I mean, all in all, me and John, we got along good. But I was leaving the track that one night, and I walked by the scales, and I looked over. Johnny looked at it. I said, Johnny, congratulations on your win. He said, Dave, come here. He said, I know we're having a tough year. We're not getting along and all that. He says, do me a favor. He says, bring that car up to me and let me scale it. He said, that thing is the biggest piece of shit in the world. You did not win all them races, all them championships by not being able to drive. He said, it's not you, it's that freaking car. He said, bring it to me and let me scale it. He said, that thing is bad. And I said, yeah, let me think about it, Johnny. And I hemmed and hawed about it, and 3 weeks later he died. And I always regretted, because I've never seen a car go around a track like a Blewett car. They are just, I mean, they're on rails all the time. And I would have loved to have had his setup in my car one time, but I kicked myself.
Sometimes it's just good. It's just good to have somebody with a new set of eyes look at your car. He might have found something bent that you were overlooking. You know what I'm saying? Like he might have just found something, a little something that made a big change for you. But then again, you're saying like your best car was that 1994 Troyer car where it worked and it just worked. You can always get a car too that just never works right. You can do all you want with it, and the clip could have been put on a little crooked or something like that. You just never know.
Yeah, Kevin Kramer, he threw everything he had at that car. That thing should have been knocking the wall down tight. And after it would burn the newness of the tires off, it would just want to spin out every week after week. We could never figure that thing out.
All right. The final question we always, well, number one, I want to say that you retire from driving yourself, but I still see you at the racetrack every once in a while. And if not at Wall Stadium, I know you enjoy, you and Timmy Airy are still great friends, and I know you guys enjoy going to the races together. I mean, I've seen you guys at New Egypt Speedway. I see you guys on Facebook. You go to the big races, you go to the NASCAR races. Tell us about some of the big NASCAR events you've been to. You ever been out to Indy or anything like that?
Yeah, I've been to Indy twice. Been to Michigan twice, Talladega twice, Bristol like 3 or 4 times. We're allowed to go like 5 times a year with Martin to get the hot passes. So Timmy usually goes with me 2 or 3 times a year, and we usually have some good times.
Yeah, just so people know, with the big NASCAR racing, you're allowed to go. I think it's 4 Cup races you're allowed to go to, and if you, as a guest, if you go to any more than 4 or 5 races, you have to get a hard card, and those hard cards are very expensive. We do the same thing. We try to make it to about 4 Cup races, and then once we use up our guest passes, we don't go anymore because it's just too expensive to get the hard cards.
Yeah, it's like $5,000 for the hard card. Like you can do 5 a year, and we actually used up our 5th race the year Martin won his championship, and we went to Homestead. And Martin said, "Look, all my family's coming down." He said, and he's only allowed, I think, 5 or 10. I think he's allowed 5 per race. And he said, "Look, my whole family's coming down. I need like 50 hot passes." So because he was in the chase, NASCAR, let him have it, and we all went in the pits after the race. That was pretty cool.
I know things were all screwed up this year, and I know me and Nancy were down in Homestead, and we wanted to stop and see you guys in Homestead. We never got a chance to meet up. But we were actually going to stop at the house you were staying at that Friday night when the trucks were racing. We were on the way back to Isla Mirada. We were going to stop in the Keys and visit with you guys. I know you guys were having a big family fish fry and stuff like that. Unfortunately, we were at Homestead and it rained, and it was like a 3-hour delay, and we didn't get out of the racetrack till about midnight, 1 o'clock. And by the time we were passing where you guys were at, it was probably 2 in the morning. I know you guys were probably still up partying, but it was getting late, so we just went to the hotel. Before all this Corona stuff started, what races were you planning on doing this year?
Me and Timmy were going to do Darlington, which is coming up. I was going to do, I was thinking about Bristol again. I was going to go to Martinsville for the race when they had the modifieds there. And I had a couple more that I wasn't sure. I didn't want to commit myself to.
Do you stay in hotels or do you do the camper thing?
Nah, we stay in hotels.
All right, Dave, you've been to a lot of racetracks. You've been around forever. The final question we ask all our guests, what was your favorite track food?
I think we stumped him.
Either a Martinsville hot dog or a Wall Stadium cheeseburger.
You really like the Wall Stadium cheeseburger?
Let me back up. The meatball subs at East Windsor were probably the best.
Okay. A lot of people say the meatball subs at New Egypt, they were good too at New Egypt Speedway.
Yeah, Tessie Garback, when she had to stand, that was good. But later on, things fell apart. But Mama Garback, she made good meatballs.
Now, one of the things in racing, I could never eat on a Saturday before I race. Like I literally get up in the morning and I can't eat nothing until the race is over. Were you the type of person that can actually eat on the day of a race?
Hell no. I know every night before the feature, I'd run over to the stand. I had a regiment. I'd get 2 cheeseburgers and an order of fries, and I'd sit on the back of the hauler. And I was actually putting my helmet on, putting the last bite of the cheeseburger in my mouth every night.
So you could eat before you raced?
Oh, hell yeah. It never bothered me.
Oh, really? I could never eat, man. I could never eat before I got in a race car. And then I'd see some guys, like you say, eat 2 cheeseburgers and then jump in a race car. I could just never do that.
After the race, we drank about a case of beer to wash the cheeseburgers down.
Another question we always have for people too. I mean, I know you always had like a 45-minute ride home. A lot of people up this way would go to Woody's or the cabin after the races. Did you have any certain places you would stop on your way home from the races, maybe to have dinner or a few drinks, or did you just go straight home?
Yeah, there was a local bar in Mount Hawken called the Back Cabin. It was a liquor store in the front, and the bar was in the back. With a liquor store, we closed down at 10 o'clock, and you had to come through the back door. It was like a secret society most people didn't know about. But sometimes they would stay open until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when they were supposed to stay, close at 2. I remember one night, Kevin Kramer's wife and my wife, we were going back to Kevin's house after the bar closed. Well, they needed some booze, so my wife and Kevin's wife did the army crawl through the bar, out to the liquor store, loaded up their coats with bottles of booze, and snuck back out the back door.
Where was
I also remember too. I'm like guys like Jerry Kramer, Bobby Walton, and even like Martin Truex Jr. I remember those guys running out of the racetrack because they actually had to go to work that night. Didn't they used to leave the racetrack and go right out on the boats?
Yeah, lots of them guys would. They had to go clamming that night, and they couldn't even go out and celebrate.
Yeah, and I know when Jerry and all them started racing Flemington Speedway, he didn't like it because at Flemington we pitted in the infield, and after the modified feature, there's a lot of times he couldn't get out of there. He had to wait like an extra hour to get out of there, and he was actually in a rush to go to work. Did you ever work on the clam boats?
Yeah, I worked once, probably 1 year out there. I can't remember what year it was. It was a year the space shuttle blew up, because I remember getting back to the dock and the people on the dock, like, people were crying. I didn't know what it was about, so they told us about it.
That was January of '86 when that happened.
Yeah, it was 86. I think I was in 7th grade when that happened, 86, and I graduated 8th grade in 87. So, yeah, probably 86.
Now, I know Manahawkin's changing a lot, especially over the past decade, really. I mean, I know you have Truex Boulevard down there and all, but, I mean, there is nonstop construction in that area and along 72, and they're redoing all the back roads and Doc Kramer and all that. Where was that bar located in Manahawkin, if you don't mind me asking?
Down on Bay Avenue, across from Woodhaven Lumber. There's that strip mall.
Okay.
There's a retrofit gym in there. That was the bar.
Okay. All right, cool.
You used to drive around the back.
Hey, Dave, did you know that Holiday Inn, the new Holiday Inn on 72 by Route 9, did you see that they're putting a go-kart track in there?
Yeah, they have it. They brought our fire department. They took the guy that owns it, said the entire fire company went over there. There was like 50 of us went over there. They're electric powered go-karts.
Yeah, I drove by there the other day and said, wow, they're putting a go-kart track in there. That was pretty cool.
They also have that climbing thing too, right? Like all those poles.
Yeah, like there's like ropes or like a climbing wall or something there too, and nets and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you better be in good shape. The boys like me and Timmy, we're not getting up on those ropes.
What do you still do for a living now? You still do the dock building?
Yeah, I'm still bulkhead until they put me in the ground. Me and my wife.
Behind like a bulkheading place. Was that the bulkheading place that your dad owned?
Well, him and Sonny Rothstein were partners. I worked there when I was a kid, and then when they retired, I ended up going with Butterick Bulkhead, and I've been there for almost 36 years.
Yeah, and you live right behind there, right? Isn't that in front of your house?
I'm up behind Southern Regional High School. This Butterick is up a little bit farther past Southern Regional.
Oh, okay.
And then back in January, me and my wife bought a restaurant in Ship Bottom, and then all this started, so that's put a hurt on things.
So who actually works the restaurant while you're doing the bulkheading?
Both of our daughters, and we kept the staff that was there originally, and then Kyle does the bookkeeping, and I go over and do whatever's got to be fixed or built or stuff like that. But
it's definitely a tough time for the restaurant industry now. I hope you apply for some of these loans. I know I did through the towing business, but they're real tough to get, you know. I actually got one loan, but it was only about $1,000. But right now I'll take about anything.
Right.
All right, Dave, we really appreciate you coming on. We love hearing your stories. I just want to apologize about the 67 win thing. I cut you one win short, one championship short, and I know they're really super tough to win.
Right.
And with that being said, did you ever lose a championship only by a few points? Because I lost one time only by 3 points.
Now you got to get me started.
Oh boy!
The first year that Timmy Shin took over the track, they had that guy from, I think it was Evergreen Speedway or
Yeah, it was
Mahoning.
like Joe something, right?
Terry, I thought his name was. Not the manager, the pit steward. Remember his guy's name was Terry?
Yeah. It's like Terry Eames or something like that, wasn't
Terry
it?
told me about a year later. I was running second to Felix one day. It was a 50-lapper double point race towards the end of the season. And I was like 30-some points up on Jimmy. Well, Felix's motor started to lock up coming off of 4. Well, he started to get down to get in the infield, and I clipped him in the right rear, and he spun at the same time he was getting down. Well, I ended up winning the race. When the race was over, they put me to the rear, and they gave Jimmy the win. So you're talking a 100-point swing, which Jimmy ended up winning the championship. Well, Terry told me about a year later at Turkey Derby, he says, I just want to apologize. I said, for what? He said, Timmy Shin told me in any way possible, if I can take points away from you, to do it. And that night, I swear, that night, me and Felix walked up to Terry and said, Terry, I did not spin him out. And Felix said, my motor was blowing up. I was trying to get to the infield. Nope, I saw him take you out. He said, he did not take me out. And this guy would not change his mind for nothing. And a year later, it all came out. So that cost me a championship, and something else stupid happened, but I think I should have a couple more. There's probably 2 that I shouldn't have won, but who knows?
Well, that's what I mean. It does. It evens out in the end. You know, so like you say, you might have got lucky 2 years and ended up winning, and then a couple of years you probably lost them when you should have won them. You know, it kind of evens out in the end.
But that one hurts when you find out somebody purposely did that to you. I mean, that's not fun.
No, it's especially all the hard work you put into doing it. You know. I know I'm going to let you go here in a second. I just want to ask you one more question, because you're racing very similar to the way I race. You know, I always owned my own race cars, and I never really took rides with anybody. I kind of like calling my own shots, where it kind of financially hurts me, and I always kind of wondered if I would took a ride. Or did you ever drive for anybody else, or did you ever like turn down a ride that you wish you might have taken?
Yeah, I ran for Alice Ann a couple races in the 15B, and we ran Sammy's car when he had that black 3. It looked like Earnhardt's car.
Yeah.
We ran in New Egypt. We won opening night. I won the heat. Then they had a dash for cash for the heat winners. I won that. Then I won the feature. The following week, it was like the same scenario. I was going for the lead in the heat race, and the guy that I passed the week before for the heat win hooked me in the right rear, and it spun me, and I went straight in the backstretch wall. It was probably the hardest hit I've ever had. It drove the nose piece through the fence, and I punched the old fiberglass dashboard with my hands. I thought I cut my fingers off. That rung my bell. I've never had a hit like that in my life, and you're only talking a quarter-mile racetrack.
No, I know that New Egypt Speedway, there were some hard wrecks there. I mean, I remember Richie Evans hitting the pit gate one time. That was bad. John Blewett hit the pit gate one time. That was real bad. I remember cars coming off of 4 and hitting the fence there, and the cars being total, for, like you said, for a quarter-mile racetrack, you could actually hit there pretty hard.
Well, look at Charlie 2 weeks in a row with 2 different cars at the end of the front stretch.
Yeah, but that was with the lines, right?
He did it with Howard Harvey's car, and he did it with Vinnie Galini's car.
Yep.
Both weeks.
The throttle stuck both times.
Yep.
All right, Dave, we really appreciate you coming on. It's getting later here. We're going to let you get going. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Give Timmy an order of wings on me. He looks a little famished back there.
I'll take them.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave.
All right, Dave. Thanks a lot, buddy.
All right. Thanks for having me. Okay.
Hey everybody, this is Sam Ballard from the RPM Podcast. Planning an event and looking for a great time? Go no further than RC2U Racing for all your portable family entertainment. RC2U turns any occasion into a competition. Check them out online at rc2uracing.com.
And we're back for the second half of the RPM Podcast, episode 171. We want to thank Dave Michael for coming on. That was a great interview, Josh. He really loves his racing. He comes from a great racing family. I really enjoyed his stories. I hope our listeners enjoyed the stories as well. What did you think about it, Josh?
I thought it was a lot of fun. Very, very knowledgeable, and obviously very accomplished. If you talk to anybody but Scott, because Scott likes to, cut him short on his wins. But actually, Scott, there was something I wanted to ask you. You were talking about the gravel pits, and anybody, if like down, I guess even my way, you had what, 2 choices? Like it was Atlantic City or Wall or the gravel pits or something.
Right.
Now, what about Atco? When the Amatol track?
Yeah, no, they had racetracks down there too. I just didn't know anybody that really lived over that way. I mean, we talked to Charlie Kremer. He was a Toms River guy, so he told us about the Toms River gravel pit. I work for Dick Barney. He's a Lakewood guy, so he tells us about the Lakewood pit. Maybe if we talk to somebody like a Tony Siscone or something, they can tell us about the Atco stuff because he lives down in Hamilton that way. Okay. Basically, if you talk to any old racer, it seems like they had a gravel pit not too far from their house that had a racetrack in it.
It does seem that way, that's for sure.
Yeah, we definitely see a pattern when we talk to different people in different sections of New Jersey. You know what I'm saying? And that's what makes this show fun. We can talk to different people. I mean, we can even start talking to people from New York, and and we have like talking to the guys up in Bethel and stuff like that. It seems like they all have the same stories. They were all the racetracks were pretty basic back when they first started, and they had to become more of a professional facility to compete later on. But it all starts with that gravel pit story. I mean, even when we talked to Michael Hager up at Bethel, that track was basically what do you say? It was like a logger's place, like a guy that cut trees down and he made a track. So they didn't have
the
gravel
coal
pits
mine.
up there by because of the natural terrain. But it was a logging community, and that's where they built their racetrack.
Or was it Big Diamond with the coal mine?
And that was a coal mine, so it's basically wherever they had space and room, they would race cars.
Well, that Amatol Speedway was built for the people that lived in the town, where they built them bombs in the guns and stuff.
Yeah.
And then there was Alcyon Speedway was down there, and Vineland Speedway was down there.
Yeah, I mean, I heard of Vineland, and Vineland was a professional racing facility. It also had a drag strip on it. Vineland was a cool racetrack. I don't think that from all the old stories I hear from all the racetracks, maybe if there's any listeners listens and they can tell us more about the Atco Oval, I just have a feeling that track didn't race very long because you don't hear much about it. You don't really see old pictures of it or anything like that. Some of these tracks would pop up and only run a few months and then never race again.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
If I could find my book, I'd look it up, but I lost that book. I can't find it anywhere. And I tried to buy a brand new one at Motorsports, and the guy was out of them. And
what was the title?
He offered me the show price if I called him during the week, and he gave me his phone number and everything, and I lost that too. So
you can't be relied on for anything. What was the name of that book, Scott?
America's Raceways, America's Racetracks, or something like that.
America's
history of American racetracks, I should say. And mine was the older version one, and they have a newer version one out. And I was going to buy the updated newer version. He was out of them. He says he has them, in stock at his warehouse, and just give him a call, and he'll send me one.
Okay, all right. I might need to check that out. Or
we're just going to blow through this stuff because it's getting late. We just want to talk about a few things on the national level and the local level. The big story right now is Matt Kenseth. He out of nowhere. I was shocked by that announcement. Weren't you, Josh? They announced Matt Kenseth is going to replace Kyle Larson in number 42 for the rest of the year. I like it. I mean, Matt's a good driver. He's 48 years old. He's got a 2003 NASCAR Cup champion, Daytona 500 wins, family man, clean cut, watches what he says. I think that's the main reason he was picked. I think he's a proven winner. Two main reasons why I think Chip Ganassi picked him. Actually three. Number one, everybody thought Ross Chastain was going to go right into it because now Ryan Newman's healthy. He got cleared. Ryan Newman's coming back, and he's going to drive the 6 car when NASCAR does start up again. So people thought Ross was done with his commitment over at Roush, helping out that situation. Frees him up. He can go to Chip Ganassi, where he's really under contract with as a development driver. They thought they were going to plug Ross Chastain in that car right away, and it made sense. But the problem was, at the beginning of the year, you have to claim what points you're racing for, and he claimed the Xfinity Series because he's racing for the point championship for the Culligan Motorsports. So he's committed to that, and if he would have went to Chip Ganassi in the 42, he wouldn't be eligible for points. So that kind of put him out of it because they want to race for points, obviously.
Right.
I personally, I think the reason they put two reasons they put Matt Kenseth, and they said it, it's no secret. Number one is he's a clean cut guy. He's good for the sponsors. All the sponsors wanted him. They talked it over with the sponsors, say, yeah, he's the perfect guy. He'll help us out in this sticky situation, and he's a good racer. Number two, he's a former teammate of Kurt Busch's. Kurt Busch really pulled to get Matt Kenseth in there because they raced good together, and they said they're kind of like the same age group and from the same generation, and they talk the same lingo, and they think they worked good together before, I think, over at Roush Racing. So they're kind of like reuniting as teammates, and I think it's going to be a good thing. I think Matt's still got some good racing in him.
I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be plenty competitive. I guess I was shocked and not shocked because it was, other than the Ross Chastain thing, it was really like up in the air. I mean, it could have been anybody. It could have been a newer person. It could have been.
I actually thought they would have went with Jamie McMurray.
That was another
Jamie
rumor.
McMurray was rumored to come back because all those sponsors that were on that 42 car, they were all Jamie McMurray's old sponsors when he was there. McDonald's and that Clover and, that one bank that sponsors them. They were all Jamie McMurray sponsors. So he has a working relationship with them. I don't know if that was what fell apart there. I don't know if Jamie turned it down or because he's got that TV contract gig going. I don't know why they didn't put Jamie in, but I thought if Ross wasn't going to go in it and they were going to go with the younger driver Ross, and if they were going to go with an older veteran, they were just going to bring Jamie McMurray back.
Okay. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, I really, who else was in contention for it though? I guess would be the question.
Everybody pretty much has their deals going now. I mean, other than bringing a guy like Greg Biffle back, or
actually, that was. I'm not going to lie. Now here's the thing. I don't follow the teams like, oh well, he races for RCR and this. I don't follow that as closely. Honestly, I'm kind of dumb when it comes to that stuff. I know drivers' names and stuff. Clint Boyer, I'm sorry, not Clint Boyer. Jeez.
Greg Biffle?
Yeah, Greg Biffle. Sorry. Was in my head as a possibility because, there was talk of him bringing his gear to, Daytona. And, but I don't know because you said he's always been like a pretty solid Ford guy and everything. And so I don't know if that was,
and so really Matt Kenseth was too. I mean, his last full-time ride was a Toyota though. But he's never raced a Chevy. So it's going to be kind of cool seeing him going to a Chevy. There was Greg Biffle and then maybe trying to twist Carl Edwards' arm to coming back to racing. But I was listening to Dale Jr.'s podcast today while I was out towing in the tow truck. He said he thought about calling Chip Ganassi and trying to get in that car. He said, he still has a little bit competitive fire, and whenever a ride comes available, he's like, man, what if I do that, And he said he went to bed saying, in the morning I may make a couple phone calls, but he said by the time he woke up in the morning, he decided against it,
Well, I mean,
it would be cool to see Dale Jr. in that car. It's a Chevy, you know what I'm saying? McDonald's sponsorship. It would have been pretty cool seeing him in that car.
Honestly, that would be pretty all-American in a lot of ways. But at the same time,
he said he thought about it for a hot minute. Like he slept on it and woke up in the morning. He's like, you know what?
I think
his going on here. He's got a new kid on his way. They have another daughter coming into the world soon, so he's got his plate pretty full. But on the other hand, they said to Matt Kenseth, they said, well, you turned down that 6 ride. You could have had that full-time ride. Why didn't you take that? Now, if you're coming back, he's like, you know what? I didn't take that full-time ride because I have young daughters and they play sports and everything. And I wanted to be there as the father with them and watch them play their sports. And they're like, well, now you're going to miss all that. He's like, yeah, but if you think about it, it's a perfect time to come back. All their sports are canceled. All their schools are canceled. I'm not missing any of that stuff because they're not doing it this year. It's all done for 2020. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I would say the one thing with Dale Jr. Would be potentially the health and, like you said, his lifestyle has changed drastically. Where if he could pick and choose a handful of races, that's one thing, but if you're going to sign on to be the driver. Now, actually, this actually brings up a good question. What about not being a single driver? What if they traded off? And
because they want to race for points.
Okay. So you're sticking with the driver.
Got to prove the race for the championship. He's still eligible to try to win the championship.
Yeah, because technically 0 races have been run. So.
Yeah, NASCAR already made some exception. If he wins a race and he's in the top 30 in points, he can still be a part of the chase. That's why they already addressed that too. They were thinking about doing 2 or 3 drivers, but then when they found Matt Kenseth and NASCAR gave him, the same thing they did for Kyle Busch when he got hurt, he can run for the championship. So they want to still have a chance to race for the championship.
Now, speaking of that, Scott, there was a schedule or a rough schedule, would we call it, or tentative schedule that was released? Yeah.
Hopeful schedule. I like it though. Hey, did you see the latest one? They're going to do a lot of stuff.
The Wednesdays?
Close by. A lot of Wednesday shows, and you see the laps, 310 laps or 310 miles, I should say, on the midweek shows. I think it's perfect. I'd love to sit home on a Wednesday night and watch a 310 mile cup race.
As long as I'm not in physical therapy or something, I mean, sure. I mean, it all depends. Well, here's the thing: if you're going to do it on Wednesday, and if you want to draw the TV crowd, because let's face it, that's what a lot of it's about, is getting the TV money coming in.
It's exactly what it's about.
You're going to need to do it at night, so you need to pick tracks with lighting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to need to find, the way to work it so that way.
Well, they wanted to stay not too far away from North Carolina because they kind of want to do 1-day shows. You know what I'm saying? They don't want to make it like 3-day shows, and they don't want the guys traveling too much because there's more chances of catching the coronavirus. So they're sticking close by.
Yes, they want to roll in, practice, qualify, race, and get the heck out of there.
They're talking about not even practicing and qualifying. They're talking about rolling in and just racing.
That would be certainly interesting.
And that was the only downfall Matt Kenseth said he had with this whole deal. Everything lined up perfect for him. His kids aren't in school. It's all canceled. They're not playing sports. It's all canceled. He's not missing any time with his kids. He's not going to be away for 4 days to do a one-day race. He's only going to be away 1 day racing and be back home that night to be with his family.
Right.
He said the only downfall of it is because he hasn't raced in a while, and now he's in a Chevy. He's never raced a Chevy in a long time. And now there's not going to be practice, so he's missing out on some practice. So that he said that the only problem he's seen with this deal is he's going to be very limited on practice time. But then again, he says they're going with, if you notice too, Josh, they're going with that 550 horsepower small spoiler package for the next few races because that's what the team's already had built up and available.
Right.
And Matt's never raced that, but he said he's fine. He's like, when he raced it, they were 800 horsepower, so I'm cutting it back to 550. He said he'll be fine.
Yeah, I think he'll be a quick study on that. But as much as like I'm a Chevy guy and all that, I don't think it's gonna matter as much as it used to. Like, and I'm talking about like the late 70s or 80s NASCAR when you were factory drivers and stuff like that. I think that most everybody's hitting the same RPMs. It's maybe a question of reliability, but I mean, Eric Graham points out, how often do you see motors blow up anymore? So, it being a Chevy, I don't know how much different it really would be at this level. I think it's more minutia, in my opinion. As much as I want to support, a manufacturer, I don't see it being.
Oh, it's funny you say that. In the real world, we don't see many blowing up motors, but in the virtual world, we've seen Clint Boyer blow up 2 motors in a row now. What's going on there, Josh? They're blaming him. They say he sucks up to the cars in front of him, and he doesn't watch his gauges and just lets the motor blow up.
Yeah, I think. Can we equate this to like, what is it, Maverick in Top Gun or whatever? That whole seat of your pants thing. Is Clint Boyer a seat of your pants driver, and he can feel it and know what he has to do, but virtually it doesn't translate? I mean, we look at Kyle Busch, who is, whether you like him or hate him, one of the best drivers we've ever seen, and he's struggling with the iRacing. It is I'm not saying, look, it's not apples to apples.
I think the reason why Clint Boyer's blowing motors up in this iRacing stuff is because he's not 100% focused when he's doing it. They got him on TV cameras. They got him talking to Jeff Gordon. He's more like goofing off and doing an entertaining show, and he's not watching his gauges, and he's blowing the motors up.
He's being more of an entertainer than a driver.
When it happened,
Yeah. It was, but I know exactly. When you talk about, he's, sucking up in the draft and, he's not getting air in there, which, I mean, that's a testament to iRacing being more realistic. But at the same time, yes, Scott, he is playing to the camera a bit more and being more of an entertainer than a driver and goofing off, goofing off to an extent. But, I mean, that's kind of what people like, is that he's fun and energetic and entertaining.
Right.
So
another funny thing that happened during the Talladega iRacing, virtual racing, whatever you want to call it, eNASCAR or whatever they're calling it now.
Mm-hmm.
Denny Hamlin's daughter came into the room to ask their father if they can go outside and ride the go-karts. And when she was in, she accidentally hit the power button on his TV and shut his TV off while he was racing.
And that's why he missed his pit box, I believe.
That's why he was out of the race.
Yeah.
She shut him off.
Yeah. Yeah. So he eventually, I guess, well, they were saying he was DQ'd, but yeah, like he said, they accidentally hit the power button and screwed that up. So
it's going to be the first time like a NASCAR driver's dropped out of a race because his daughter shut the TV off.
Well, hey, power problems are not new to NASCAR. There was that, was it a practice at Daytona when half the lights went out, years ago? Stuff like that. Was it Chase Elliott got ticked off and wrecked Gordon?
Which is kind of funny because Chase is like Gordon's protege, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. What else? We had Bowman getting the win. That was overall. It wasn't a bad race. It was definitely different, and it kind of showcased where now, Scott. I know you're obviously a huge fan of regular racing and not as much of a fan of the iRacing. Not that you despise it, but I'm going to say that in a lot of aspects, the iRacing has been pretty good, but I think Talladega made it look. I don't know, because Talladega and Daytona are normally so tight, and every little twitch matters. I think iRacing almost gives you a little bit too much leeway.
The one thing I did like about them racing Talladega and the iRacing, they were back to like a bigger field. I think they had like 38 or 39 cars in it, where at the short track they only had 26. So I like that there was more people out there racing. Me and my brother talked about this during the week too. I think this iRacing stuff, it's starting to lose its shine a little bit. People are really getting sick of it. Not getting sick of it, but everybody's just ready for real racing, and the iRacing on TV isn't as popular as it was when they first did it. It's still something to watch, but now that we're hearing that real racing is going to start again May 17th, people are just ready to get done with the iRacing and get to the real racing.
Maybe. I mean, I'm enjoying it. Regardless, I have been watching, and it is enjoyable.
You have the top 10 for that race, Josh?
Yes, I do. Alex Bowman, we said, got the win. Corey LaJoie, there you go. In second.
He ran good. He ran real good.
Ryan Preece, another name, in third.
He runs good in the iRacing.
Garrett Smithley, Landon Castle, William Byron, Brennan Poole, Kyle Busch doing fairly well, followed closely by Kurt Busch, Daniel Suarez, and that's your top 10. So, hey, Suarez is in the mix. Look at that.
Yeah. All right, let's keep moving on here because I want to get off here soon. It's almost 10 o'clock already. Did you want to do anything with the Indy stuff, Josh?
Mainly because IndyCar was racing at COTA, Circuit of the Americas, out in Austin, well, virtually. It was a pretty cool race all around. They did have a competition caution, which you really do not see in IndyCar ever, including virtually. So that kind of bunched the field back up. A notable thing that happened was Lando Norris from Formula One actually joined in for this IndyCar race at COTA, and he did extremely well. And spoiler alert, he won.
Did he really?
Yeah. It's his first time racing with IndyCars, and he actually won.
I mean, a lot of people don't follow Formula One and IndyCar real closely, but there's definitely a little bit of a pissing contest between the two series. And Formula One guys make fun of the IndyCar guys, saying they're too slow and Formula One's real fast. I bet they took it real bad that a Formula One guy came in and won that race, even though it's iRacing.
I wouldn't be all that surprised if the IndyCar guys were a little walking away with their tail between their legs after this. Now, Lando Norris actually, he had a couple questionable moments going off track and stuff, and he still managed to win this, which it said a lot. Will Power was doing well. I think he started a second, and he ended up finishing second. No. Where the heck did he finish? He had he finished sixth. Let's see. Yeah, like I said, Lando Norris actually went off the track, and still managed to win. Overall, for a road course, there was a lot of really good close racing. I mean, side by side and stuff like that. Which I know it's IndyCar. They get single file a lot, and another thing to note is 33 cars.
Again.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, this is huge because normally 13 of those cars are not there. I mean, you're adding that much more to the track, which is great.
All right, let's get to the brawn of it. Where did Marco Andretti finish?
Hang on. Let's see here. Marco Andretti. I'm looking for it.
So actually, his 18th place finishes are actually better than I really thought because there's 33 cars out there instead of like 23 cars. So it's actually
now they are. Hang on. I'm still looking. Was he even in this? I am not seeing him.
All right, give us the top 10 so we can get moving on here.
Yep, you got it. So Lando Norris from Formula One gets the win. Patricio O'Ward comes in second. Rosenquist in third. Scott McLaughlin, an iRacer and from Australia, who had gotten a win previously, he finishes fourth. Santino Ferrucci, Will Power, Rinus VK, Marcus Ericsson, Alex Palau, and Joseph Newgarden are your top 10. There were a few other notables and whatnot in there, but I'm not going to go too deep into it. But it was overall a lot of fun. I think it was really good for IndyCar, and I think more people should check that out. So moving on to the local segment, I will let Scott take it away here.
Yeah, unfortunately, last weekend we talked about John Lane passing away, and we didn't forget to mention Steve Senercia. We just saved it for this week. Another person that passed away who raced local with us around here was Steve Senercia. Steve was a great guy. I raced street stocks with him. He was definitely one of the guys that he worked on his own stuff. He owned his own race cars. He towed his own race cars to the track. And he raced for the love of racing. I mean, a lot of times Steve didn't have the very best equipment, but he ran very well for what he had. He always had fun. He was one of those guys that were definitely there for the party after the race as well as the race itself. Steve was just a fun guy, and I was surprised to hear that he passed away of having a heart attack because Steve was in great shape. Steve was a former football player. He was a surfer. He's into enduro motorcycle riding where you ride through the woods and do like those hare scramble type races, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a little bit older. He was in his high 50s, but he actually had a heart attack doing what he loved. He was actually riding his dirt bike through the woods when he had a heart attack, and it was a massive heart attack, and he didn't survive it. I was very shocked to hear about it.
Wow.
Steve was a great guy. A lot of people called him Flip Flop because no matter what the weather was like at the racetrack, he was wearing flip flops in the pits.
Oh, that's what that was about. I was wondering. Okay.
Yeah, now he was famous for wearing flip flops in the pits. Like even when he had his fire suit on, he had flip flops on, and then he would put his racing shoes on when it was time to get in the car. Steve was a brave guy too because he tried doing other stuff outside the box, and he went ARCA racing, and he tried racing at Daytona with an ARCA car he built himself. He also did a couple of the Craftsman truck races too, on a very limited budget. He would buy older equipment and just patch it up and build it the best he can. As a matter of fact, I got to help Steve through George Reynolds' business down at Bucks. Steve actually bought a car to go ARCA racing, and he bought an old Busch Grand National car. Well, you realize when he got the old Busch Grand National car, it was a 105-inch wheelbase. ARCA cars were 110-inch wheelbase.
Oh.
So he didn't know what to do with the car, and he got talking to George Reynolds, who owned CES. And I used to help George a lot down there. And George is like, we can extend the front clip. We can add 5 inches to the frame and push the front clip ahead 5 inches, and have a 110-inch wheelbase. So I actually helped him do that, and it turned out pretty good. Steve actually, it's a funny story. Steve actually went to Daytona, and even in his obituary said he was 4th fastest in practice against big dollar teams, and that story was true. But they left that one special part, and Steve got in a little bit of trouble for this. Josh, how can a budgeted guy go to Daytona and be 4th fastest in practice?
Forget the restrictor plate?
He did not put the restrictor plate on the car.
I literally just guessed at that.
Restrictor plate on the car. Very good, Josh. That was good. And he came back in, and the ARC officials walked over and said, "Man, that car is fast." And then we realized you never came and got a restrictor plate for us because at those tracks they give you the restrictor plate.
Yeah,
he got in a lot of trouble for going out on that track without a restrictor plate.
Well, I mean, could he really get in that much trouble if he were still 4th fastest?
I mean, I didn't arrest him or anything like that, but they were not happy, But
yeah, no, I get that, but I mean,
for one practice, he was the 4th fastest car out there. You know what I'm saying? with an engine he built. And I remember he had it was like an old modified motor. I think it even had steel heads on it because George helped him with some of the machine work on that motor. And I think it was an old steel headed 23 degree or an 18 degree engine. And he went down to Daytona with it. He went to other tracks. He ran Pocono and the ARCA race and stuff like that. And I know at the end he even had a Craftsman truck and he did a few races with that, you know. And he had NASCAR late models, and he would just pick up and he would drive down south and just find racetracks that ran late models, and he would just show up and race, you know. And he enjoyed that. And he later on he got into the vintage cars too. He went all the way out to California one time and bought like an old super speedway modified and bought it back and restored it and stuff like that. He was, you know, he marched to the beat of his own drum, you know. He was a pretty cool guy. And I was glad I got to know him. He even drove around. He lived down this way, and I'd even see him on like Cooper Avenue. Even his regular street vehicle was like an old Vega, like an 80 Vega or something like that. So he was always just a little bit different than everybody else, but he really deep down he was a good guy, and Steve's going to be missed.
Now, Scott, you're saying he would just drive south and find tracks. Now, I know you had wanted to do Bronson for quite a while and then finally did it. But, I mean, would you put that at all in the same category, or did you really prepare for Bronson?
No, I would. Steve would literally build a late model because down south, all the tracks are late models and stuff.
Right.
Steve would literally just like take 2 weeks off from work and drive down there and basically just find tracks racing that had late models and just pull in and race, you know, like whatever tires he had on his car, that's what he had on his car. Like he didn't really pay attention to the rules like I did, you know. He just wanted to go out and drive different racetracks. Like he had this one old late model. He said he'd been on like 15 racetracks with it and 2 were dirt. Like, you know, he just wanted to drive different racetracks, you know.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
He was good friends with your friend Chris Felber too. You didn't know Steve through Chris Felber?
No. I actually I had seen via Facebook obviously about his passing, but the next day, a girl that I used to work with at Six Flags messaged me about him because her husband was really good friends with Steve.
It's funny you say that because that ARCA car, I helped them extend the chassis 5 inches. That car had Six Flags Great Adventure on the hood.
That's I can't explain it. I don't know, but I'm just saying that was something that was mentioned to me. So it's another connection. I was like, no, I didn't get to know him. I mean, I saw that he passed, and it's like, oh yeah, no, he was really close with my husband. Blah blah blah. Okay, and it seems like he had a wide, but obviously unexpected network of friends. Could we put it that way?
Yeah.
So
Steve was always cool because you never knew what he was going to show up to the racetrack with. When the pro stocks started changing to like late models and stuff like that, he'd show up with a car with no fenders on it one week because they were running, like the IMCA style ones, and then when they went to the regular late models, he had like this old Camaro that used to race at like Daytona that he found out in California. He raced it at Wall as a late model, he just whatever his car would sort of fit the rules with, that's where he would race,
I need to get my car back together. I need to do something like that. I remember I wanted to get a bunch of the factory stock guys to go out to that CNB Raceway Park or whatever it was. I remember you had looked it up in your book in the past. Yeah. It was a nice big track that had some banking to it, and but they all run 305s out there, and I know that we run 350s. I just wanted to see if we could find a way to compete and have some fun out there, and it sounds like he actually had the way to do it. So
yeah, he would just show up and do it. He would just show up and race. You know what I'm saying? Like he wasn't there to win, and he's like, as long as I just go out and just run respectable and not wreck with the leaders and stuff like that, they'll leave me alone at least for 1 or 2 races. You know what I'm saying? Before he had to conform to the rules. He just wanted to try different racetracks, and he had a rule too. He always told me because it was kind of before Facebook and the internet and all that stuff. He had that race directory book. They sold a book that had all different racetracks on it. He had a couple rules. They had to be like between a half mile and say like a 3/8 mile, somewhere in there, because that's where he had his motor geared for, and he said they had to be like not too far off a 95 or 85, like major highways. Like he said some of the racetracks there were out in the middle of the mountains, and he always had like an older pickup. He even had this little my brother probably remembers this too. He had like a little open trailer, and it had real small tires on it. They look like golf cart tires, and that's what he would tow all over the country with.
Wow.
So he had a couple rules, like they had to be the racetracks had to be not too far off of either 95 or 85 or Route 77 down that way. Like, it had to be off major highways. That they're the tracks he would pick to go race.
Wow. I mean, that's what do you say?
I remember he was a union. We just got off with Dave Michael. And Dave Michael's been a bulkhead or dock builder his whole life. So was Steve. Steve was in the dock builders union, and I remember him going to Daytona and seeing him at New Smyrna at the beginning of the week, and not seeing him until like the end of the week. And I'm like, Steve, where have you been? He's like, oh, I picked up a job down here. Like, he would go to the local unions down there and find a couple of days of work and make a couple $100 or whatever, so he had money to get home.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he was pretty extraordinary. He was an extraordinary guy. He was a pretty cool guy, and he was known for being like one of the hardest workers ever on a job site. Like, he was like an animal when it came to work. Like, he would really work hard. He was a big, strong guy. He could carry anything, and he would just show up in Florida, and he said he'd go to a job site, because there's docks all over the place down there and bridges and stuff, He'd walk on.
No shortage of work, yeah.
Who's the head guy here, and show him his local union card, and he'd get a couple days worth of work down there,
Wow. Okay. That's, what do you say about that? That's actually, I mean, it's
he was a cool dude, man. He was his own person, that's for sure. Steve was pretty cool, and I got to know him a little bit through the towing business. I towed a bunch of stuff for him, Steve's gonna be missed. Rest in peace, Steve. We're gonna miss you.
Yeah, definitely.
Another thing we want to talk about too, we always make reviews and recommendations. Jeff Gravat's been posting a lot of his old TV 34 shows. It was called Let's Go Racing. Me and Tim remember it when we were kids. He's been posting a lot of them on. Where is he posting them, Josh? On YouTube?
I've seen. Yeah, it was on YouTube. I think he. Well, I checked out his channel, and it looks like there's only like 3 videos posted. But now, in a shock to me, this video that we're talking about, it was like the history of Wall Stadium, already had like over 1,300 views, and it's been up for 4 days. Meanwhile, our podcast gets, what, 500?
Yeah. You know what? Me and Nancy were talking about this the other day. The last 3 guests we had for this local Legends of Racing series have been modified drivers. I said maybe it's time to, we had 3 modified drivers on. Maybe it's time to do something a little different. I think Jeff Gravat would be a good guest. Bobby Menschner has also been calling me wanting to come on. Maybe we'll get somebody like that on for the next Legends racer.
Well, you said Pastor Bob there lives down by me, right?
Yeah. He called me today. He set the go-to meetings app on his phone and everything. He's ready to be interviewed. He said he's been this is going to be his 53rd year at Wall Stadium. He said he's got some great stories he would like to tell on air.
See, I'd love to have him in the studio. This damn virus is screwing that up.
But this series we're doing while there's no racing going on, it doesn't have to be necessarily a racer that actually drove the car. It can be a crew chief, engine builder, people that work behind the scenes. And I think Jeff Gravat and Bob Menschner would be great ones to have on. Maybe even like an Earl Krause, that'd be a good one too,
Oh, Earl Krause. I mean, we'd have to do like a 10-part series at minimum. I mean, that guy is like the racing encyclopedia for this area.
All right. So if you guys want to see some old racing videos, I know Jeff Gravat's been posting on his Facebook, and it's on YouTube too. You know what the YouTube channel is, Josh?
Jeff Gravat Marketing, I believe.
Okay. All right. So check that out on YouTube. We highly recommend it.
The Wall message board also had it.
You still go on that? The South Jersey Dirt Racing website? You go on that?
South Jersey and the Wall board, both of them, because I share our show.
Right. Okay.
Honestly, our view count jumps quite a bit after I post on there.
Okay, cool.
A lot of people go through there because they can't hit the subscribe button over here. Down, yeah. Click that, yeah. And don't forget to click the thumbs up button, because somebody apparently got confused and hit the thumbs down button on our last episode. I don't know what happened.
Josh takes that real personal. I think I'm going to start hitting the thumbs down button on our YouTube videos, just because Josh takes it real personal. We're going to have like 30 thumbs down this week, Josh.
Can I delete you now?
All right, guys. That pretty much wraps it up. We want to do what have we learned?
Yeah.
I got one right off the bat. I've learned Dave Michael bought a restaurant down in Ship Bottom, and unfortunately, it's closed right now because of what's
He
going
didn't
on.
give
in
it-
the
he
country
didn't
right
give a
now.
name
I
of
feel
it.
bad for him about that, but when he opens back up, maybe we'll do a podcast from his restaurant.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right,
yeah.
Tim. Yeah, he didn't give a name. Do you know what it used to be, Scott, or what it is by chance?
No, it's in Ship Bottom. That's down by him, and we'll have to find that out later for him. And when
That's
he
not-
gets open back up, we will promote his restaurant a little bit.
That's not too far from me.
No, Ship Bottom's down by Manahawkin, right?
Yeah, it takes 72.
LBI, right?
Yeah, it's on LBI, but it's like the first town in LBI. And if you
Yeah,
like,
that'd be
Beach
cool.
Haven is like the south end. Ship Bottom.
That'd be
is, like,
cool.
right
We should
there.
do a live show from that when he opens up. Maybe we'll sit
Oh.
at a table and have a couple of guests down there.
Well, it'll be podcasting with restaurant owners.
With podcasting with dinners with podcasting with racers.
Speaking of which, Scott, did you gotta give a review on your Sea Watch clam strips you ate the other night?
Oh, they were good. You know what though? A couple of years ago, I had a crown put on one of my teeth, and whenever I eat those clam strips now, it's like I spend more time digging the piece of clam out from underneath the crown on my tooth than I do enjoying the clams. But yeah, I did. We had Sea Watch clams, frozen clams. Sea Watch is the company that Truex is owned, so they're Truex clams. You can buy them at ShopRite. They sell them in the frozen section at ShopRite.
Yes.
And we make them in the air fryer. I love clam strips, and the Sea Watch brands are very good. I enjoyed them.
Tim, what did you learn today, buddy?
Dave Michaels with the old modifieds, like where he talked about Friedman Treadway's cars, and I'm really interested in the Super Speedway modifieds. I never knew that they had one of those.
Yeah, the only
Uh,
Treadway car I knew of was the one that Ray Shea had. I was surprised to hear that he had
Oh
one
no,
too.
Tomato had one. The X9 was one. Roger Hill had one. He had a Regal, Buick Regal, like a car that you would race in the factory stocks.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yep.
They were big back then, and that's when I was just could remember racing then, so I was interested in those cars, and I knew about them.
Tell you what, another thing I learned, Dave Michael has a great memory, man. He remembers everything though.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just cool to listen about what the old cars were. You know, that's about all I learned.
What have you learned, Josh?
Today I learned that gravel pit cars were ugly, but they worked.
And they had big knobby tires.
And they didn't want to turn. I learned that very few race cars have cigarette lighters, but I do know of two. The one that Dave talked about, and what was originally, oh geez, well it started out as the 11 from Rob Hurley, then became the 54 for Tim O'Shea. I drove that car a handful of times. Yeah, Rob Hurley
tell you
built
what,
a cigarette lighter in that.
Even on the Cup level, Dick Trickle always had a
Yes.
cigarette lighter in his car. David Pearson always had a cigarette lighter in his car. On the more local level, Jerry Conner always had a cigarette lighter in his car too, right, Tim?
Yep, he did.
All right, so that's three cars I now know of that had three race cars that had cigarette lighters, which was
Yeah,
actually
there
what?
used to be a guy at Pocono. Remember the guy at Pocono? He used to race the street stock with that big cigar hanging out of his.
Yeah.
He drilled a hole in his helmet. He would stick the cigar through the hole in his helmet, and he'd race the whole race with a cigar hanging out of his helmet.
Yeah, I'd put a cigarette lighter in my car, but my luck, it would short out the whole race car. Over.
Yeah, it might. Let's see. I learned that the guys were getting speeding tickets in Don Ling's hauler. I learned that Scott loses everything except races. Notebook and his racing book, and the list goes on. And that I also learned that Scott uses his tongue on clams a lot. So yeah, that's all I got for this one. But it was definitely a fun episode. Tim, what's up?
I want to mention one thing. The other day in the mail, my mom got a gift card for $100 for food from ShopRite, and it was a religious type note in there, but it was from somebody either at the racetrack or something that sent it to her to help her.
Oh,
Yeah, so I don't know who it was, but if they're a listener of the
Hey.
show or whatever,
You're welcome.
yeah, that got lost with the text. I'm waiting for the go karts from.
So someone sent mom a $100 gift certificate to ShopRite.
Yeah,
That's
Somebody
pretty cool.
you think from the racetrack?
it was either from the races or somewhere. It just said from a neighbor or a friend.
Oh, really?
I'm just saying for somebody on that listen to the show. Thank you. You know, she
That was really
appreciated
nice. Yeah.
Oh, and I did tow 2 junk vehicles last week for Aaron Leinemann's friend that listens to the show as well. So I got some work out of the RPM podcast.
Good. Good. What was that a honk thing or is that just a separate call?
What are you opening wine over there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a
Get ready for the hot tub.
little
Josh.
happy juice for Nancy. I got to open a bottle. 10:30 at night. She's drinking wine.
Hey, I got the line for our next intro.
I saw there was a bunch of new time frames for today. I guess looks like what the middle of May now. They're saying.
Dude, everything's been so up in the air. All I know is parks are opening up, which I mean, where I've been working, I've been right up in Deal along the ocean, and the number of people on bikes and jogging by me. I mean,
You know what's going to happen? The weather's going to get nice, and they're not going to be able to contain people. People are just going to do what they want once the weather gets nice.
agree.
It's that combined with as soon as you tell somebody not to do something, that's all they want to do. It's like don't push the
Right.
button. So I've seen more people out than I normally do, mainly because they're told to stay in.
Yeah, like Tim hasn't rode a bike in like 15 years. And as soon as the governor says no more bike riding, Tim jumps right on a bike and goes riding.
I
a
went
bike
out.
around.
I went out and bought one. Yes. Can't wait to I've been
All right, guys,
preparing
that was a fun show. Let's get it wrapped up here so Josh can get it all edited out and back and up so everybody can watch it.
Yeah, I gotta get
that
it
wraps
up.
up episode 171 of the RPM podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Have a good one. See you next week.
Stay safe, everybody.